but I've heard people's stories who didn't even know the Bible and had near-death experiences where they actually went and visited hell the way that it was described in the Bible.
Cool. I don't think I would believe that person. Like, I don't know, it's so insane. If this wasn't Christianity, if there wasn't an entire historical precedent of people believing this shit for so long to the point where it's become normalized in society, we would see the things these people are saying as cult-like. Because it is. Like, it's insane to me. The participation trophy that Christianity and other religions get for not, like, immediately being seen with, at the very least, skepticism when people talk about shit like this is insane. It's absurd. Like, I know we're getting into, like, the lay Reddit atheist shit, but goddamn, it's weird. So, I am not an anti-theist necessarily. I know that might be a bit of a hot take. I actually don't know how many people in my community give a damn about my religion takes. I think it's a bit more of a nuanced one, though, than maybe some other people would either give me credit for when they hear me talk about it, because we have talked about this topic in the past. I'm not like a full-on anti-theist, like in practice. However, I've got some takes and I'm sure they'll come out in this video. Jubilee put out a video a month ago, apparently. I don't know how I missed this. If Christians were 100% honest, so I think the idea here is since they're masked up, one of the few times that Christians will ever wear a mask, you know. The other times being when the masks have a point at the top. But anyway, the idea is that their identities are hidden and obscured, and they can say whatever they want to say that they might not otherwise because they're pussies. And, you know, it could be a fun time. So let's see what's going on.
What if you could speak your mind without fear of judgment? We brought together 7 strangers, protected their identities, and created a space for them to be completely honest.
There is some.
Oh, we get to see all of them. Interesting. Well, I won't spoil myself too much.
There is something wrong with LGBT people.
Yes. Next question. So to answer the question, there is something wrong with LGBTQ plus people? Yes, and it's called religion, religious fundamentalists, and conservatism, right-wing politics and ideology, the inherently hierarchical nature of most organized religion, and conservative ideology that leads to a in-group and out-group being a necessity. So in the context of the United States, for a lot of fundamentalist religious people, which is usually going to be Christians and Catholics, that in-group is white, cis religious people. But I think they extend like a fig leaf, an olive branch to non-religious people so long as they remain white. But they would like to, you know, proselytize and wololo them, you know, into their religion. But anyway, the fact that there is like this perfect ideal of a kind of person that they have, and they have a history of trying to craft society to actualize that hierarchy and have been unfortunately fairly successful at that, to the detriment of women, black and brown people, immigrants, people who don't follow their own religions, gay, queer, trans people, etc. You know, that is a problem that LGBTQ plus people have to face. Because of the intersectional nature of this oppression, because of how that hierarchy works, you know, inherent to a hierarchy of one group is better than all these other groups, and there's a ranking of them, there's going to be intersections there because certain people can be part of one group that's up here and one group that's down here. I've talked about this a lot. So that actually is a problem that LGBTQ plus people face. So let's go on. I'm rambling.
I'm going to say a strong no. Yes, I believe that homosexuality is a sin.
How can that be no? So what happens to sinners in your religion? They go to hell, right? If they don't atone for the sins, they get condemned to hell and are essentially tortured forever by Satan or something, right? Like that's what happens to sinners unless they atone, unless they repent. So how can you simultaneously believe that that is the fate? Oh, why am I on this scene? My bad. How can you simultaneously believe that that is the fate of homosexuals, but not think that there's something wrong with them?
But saying that like LGBTQ plus whatever,
exclamation point, backslash.
People, there's something wrong with them as people, as human beings. That's a harsh statement. So
well, you're supposed to be being 100% honest here, and I don't think you are.
It's a hard topic.
This is a really sensitive topic because I know that a lot of LGBTQ people have been hurt by the church.
It is true, but you should also remember that a lot of non-LGBTQ people have been hurt by the church. Keep that in mind. You know, actual like Christians have been hurt by the church. Just remember that.
They've been hurt by Christians. I personally have family members who identify as they, who are homosexual. While God hates sin, he loves the people, and he loves the homosexual, and he loves the transgender, because he died for them.
I love how you can tell so much about how people think of a certain group of people, specifically when it comes to the LGBTQ community, by the words that they use to refer to them. The homosexual, the transgender. There's like a word there that's missing, and you could say that it's semantics or whatever. But when I talk about queer people, which I, use because I am in the queer people category as like a broad catch-all, or the LGBTQ community, when I talk about specific people, I say, so for instance, transgender people, trans people, right? It's kind of like saying the blacks when you're talking about black people, because that's what I say. When I talk about black and brown people, I add the people at the end of that because that's what they are. It's a very subtle thing, and because of that subtlety, it's not always going to be intentional from some people, but there is a phenomenon where there will be, like with the word blacks, there will be people who will say transgenders and not include the people there because they don't see them as equal people. Or as people at all. There's always something to look out for when Christians are being 100% honest, or anybody is really. I don't know, it's just an interesting thing. Like I say, it's not a guarantee, because it is very subtle, but it's something to think about.
The problem that I do see with LGBTQ people is that the lifestyle, it does take away a lot of things.
Like what?
They're depressed.
Okay, why is that though? Why are LGBTQ people depressed? It might be because you agreed that there was something wrong with LGBTQ people, and the power structure of religion in the church in this country and its cooperation with the Republicans in the government have created conditions to people's material lives that have led them to live worse lives, either through law in the state or through social pressure in their community and in the home. Perhaps that's why they might be depressed.
Are lonely all the time, and that's not the...
They might be lonely all the time because they get ostracized by broader society if they live in a very religious community, if their home is religious. The rates of homelessness for LGBTQ youth are very high because their abusive parents, who are bigoted and agree with the person that's talking here, kick them out of the house simply because of the fact that their child might be trans or gay or whatever. Or hell, even like dating a black person when they're white. You know what I mean? Like, that might be why they're lonely. But they will always try to make it out to be like, oh, well, simply being queer is what makes you depressed, is what makes you lonely. They'll always be like, oh, those symptoms? Those are symptoms of their identity, and not the way that broader society interfaces with that identity and marginalizes and oppresses them. If you were to connect this to like black people in the Jim Crow South, you could have people, well, funnily enough, white Christians did make these kinds of arguments about black people in the Jim Crow South, and even before, about how, being black like simply makes you XYZ, sad, lonely, depressed, whatever. And that was because they were literally subjugated by the law and in their communities, right? Like, there are reasons for these things happening. What's weird about this is like, so there are no Christians, no cis-het Christians that are depressed or lonely? That doesn't happen? Pretty sure that's not actually true.
When you receive Christ, the Spirit of God can deliver you from homosexuality. And I've seen it happen with people who identify as bisexual or homosexual, and God delivers them, and they no longer choose to identify that way.
What does that even mean, God delivers them? How did that process look? What did that process look like? Let me get this straight. The person here who is bisexual or whatever, God delivered them. So you imagine that means that they decided to become religious, or were potentially coerced into becoming religious. And then they entered an institution that is incredibly oppressive to them and resistant to them, to the point where they no longer identified as whatever flavor of queer that they were in an environment that does not accept them. If that person was looking for acceptance and they saw that the only way they could was to go back into the closet, or if they legitimately did realize that, oh, no, I'm not gay. I tried sucking a dick, wasn't for me. I thought I might have been. Turns out it's not actually the case, right? And now I'm straight or whatever. Like, what does that process look like? This doesn't mean anything.
I feel like we tend to magnify the LGBTQ community. For example, I come from a Hispanic household, and sexual abuse is brushed under the rug so many times. But you choose to magnify, let's say, my gay cousin over my molester uncle. You know what I mean?
Facts,
There's something wrong with both.
And the question is,
Rush, you had me in the first half, I'm not gonna lie. What are you doing, man? What is that? How are you going to compare a person simply living their life being gay or being trans with somebody who is literally doing molestation? And that's very telling, is it not? Like, that person legitimately conflates. They see a trans person existing and they think, oh, that person must be a molester. They are on par with a molester. Now, there's a certain G word that people have been misusing on the right against literally all queer people and allies to queer people that kind of describes that in a very sweet, succinct way. The fact that they call literally anybody who is queer, or even cishet people who are allies to queer people and queer liberation, groomers, with no evidence to accuse people of heinous crimes like being threats to children, but that's how they see queer people. So what's funny is I will extend, as a person who is not like anti-theist in practice, but, you know, talk about like my broader thoughts on the topic. Like, if you go back in time, like, religion never happened, blah, 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 or whatever kind of hypotheticals you want. We live in a world that has religion. And it is what it is. It is a tool that can be used for good or bad. Unfortunately, it is often used for bad, and I'm not a big fan of that because of that. But I will extend more charitability to religious people than a lot of religious people will to me. And the only thing I've done is come to the understanding that I am not cisgender, that I happen to be trans femme. The only thing that I've done is come to the understanding of my own identity, that I am not heterosexual, that I am pansexual. That's it. That's all I've done.
and why do we magnify the sin of homosexuality?
So I will say that while it is ridiculous that that person before conflated people simply existing as queer with the crime of molestation, which is insane, it is true that Christians do magnify the so-called sin of homosexuality. They magnify the harms that they perceive, which have never been founded in reality, that homosexuals commit to them. And I think the reason for that is just politics. Republicans and the Republican Party have successfully fused religion with politics. That's why evangelical voters, evangelical Christians, are the voting bloc that Republicans can most rely on and have a lot of power in the United States, unfortunately, because of that. They have successfully fused politics with religion, in that politics has kind of become their religion. And the reason for this is because the ultimate goal for a lot of the people in the Republican Party is to institute a kind of theocratic dictatorship in the United States of America. They don't like democracy. They never have. They've been very open about that. They used to be more covert about it, but now they've been very open about it. They even attempted a coup, and there are still people defending that on the Republican side to this day. They very clearly don't like the idea that everybody in the country gets to vote on the people that make the decisions that affect everybody. They want to control all of it in a top-down way. They are authoritarian. So they've been working very strongly to try to fuse religion and politics to meet that end, and they've been fairly successful. That's why the gay cake baking thing was so big for them. I don't think they ended up winning that, but that's part of the method. They magnify the so-called sin of homosexuality because it is politically advantageous for them to do so. They could just turn the other cheek and live and let live if they wanted to, but they face a lot of social pressure to be activist about being anti-gay or anti-queer or whatever. Not only that, but it is also very profitable for a lot of the pundits that traffic in it. It gets people to vote for politicians that traffic in it. So this very small minority of people, queer people, in the scope of the broader, society we live in, is simultaneously incredibly weak and needing of saving from God, but are also incredibly detrimental to the fabric of society and of humanity in their eyes. The enemy is simultaneously incredibly weak, but also all-powerful. It's a very consistent theme that you'll see.
It's because no one goes around saying murdering's okay, that theft is...
That's not actually true, though. If you've been a trans person or a queer person in modern America, and especially within the last 4 or so years, there are a lot of right-wingers who are essentially going around and saying, yeah, they think murder is actually okay. Especially when talking about trans people and so-called groomers, right? They will wear shirts that say, quote, kill your local pedophile with an AR on it. And then they will go to drag story time where there's a person literally dressed like a Disney princess wearing more clothes than people would on average walking down the street, reading to kids, call that person in the presence of kids groomers and pedophiles. Simply because that person they assume is queer. If you put 2 and 2 together there, it almost seems like everybody that they call a so-called groomer, they don't think is worthy of moral consideration, and therefore it's okay to do whatever you want to them, because you're so-called defending the kids.
Okay, but there are people going around saying, well, love is love and homosexuality is just love, and they're trying to justify it. And so the church has to do some sort of defense, and that's why this sin gets more attention than the others.
Yeah.
And so they can escape their shame not by marching down a street shouting pride, embrace who you are, look within. They can escape their shame by casting it on Christ and receiving his forgiveness.
Amen.
Ugh, people agreed with that. So this is the egregious crime that this person is describing that queer people have committed. Are you ready? The so-called sin of homosexuality. Queer people existing, being happy to exist, and expressing that. That's the crime. And apparently, the church has to do some kind of quote-unquote defense in response to that. But how is that defensive? How are queer people simply existing a threat to you? How are queer people simply existing a threat to the church? As far as I'm aware, there aren't very many queer people out there that are like being activists on the ground trying to close churches or trying to like de-religionify people. Like, queer people have a very soft touch when it comes to criticisms of religion most of the time. Most of the time, it's just like, okay, well, I mean, you can believe what you want to believe, but as soon as you start using your personal beliefs to harm other people, that's where, you know, I kind of don't like it. So if you try to infiltrate the government and pass laws to make my existence illegal, I'm not going to be okay with that. And if you use your religion as a justification to do that, I'm not going to be okay with that. I think any reasonable, rational human being should be able to understand that point of view and empathize with it. That's like the standard take. But even this logic is really dumb. The only reason why the so-called sin of homosexuality gets more attention than the others is not because people are expressing themselves as being queer and saying it's okay to be that and saying that they're proud of being that, because that's literal reality. It is okay to be queer. There has been no studies, no demonstrable harm for queer people existing. There have not been, and there never will be, because it's a fool's errand to try to prove that. The reason why there's more attention given to it is because it's politically advantageous. It is advantageous for religious people, the majority of which are going, if they are activists about this in this way, going to be Republican, who are trying to magnify that so-called sin in order to get votes, get money, get power. That's it. That's all it is. That's literally all it is. It's interesting to me how they all just matter-of-factly accept the notion of homosexuality as a sin. There is really little scriptural basis for it. It's because it's been politicized. That's literally it. It's because it's been politicized. They have turned religion into politics. It's been that way for a while.
Women who get abortions are murderers.
No. But this argument is very boring. You imagine that majority of the people that are going to agree, they're going to be like, oh my God, life begins at conception, so if you have an abortion, you're a murderer. It's so boring. We've like litigated this conversation so many times. No, everybody agreed.
It is God who
Imagine
gives
my
and takes
shot.
away life. Man or woman has no place taking a life that they didn't breathe into.
So what about murder and self-defense? If somebody's coming at me with a knife and I have the opportunity to take their life, and if I don't, they take mine, I have a reasonable assumption that that's the case. I did not breathe life into that person, but they're about to take mine. Am I allowed to do that then? Or is that not the same kind of murder?
There is no going around that one, I think, for Christians. You kill a baby, that makes you a murderer.
Well, I guess the majority of people are murderers then. Because it seems like that's not the majority opinion. Doesn't the Bible also say that life doesn't start until your first breath? No, it's the politicization of religion once again. Conservatives, Christians, Republicans understand that the unborn are one of the best groups to advocate for and use as a wedge in your political activism. The reason for this is because they don't exist yet. They don't have the capacity to talk for themselves. So you speak for them. It's the same reason why, a lot of their hatred directed at queer people is like, oh my God, but what about the kids? What about the children? You got to save the children. Because children also can't speak for themselves. If they could, you'd come to realize that more and more as time goes on, more and more younger generations become more and more accepting of queer people and are more and more in favor of somebody's individual liberty to do with their body what they think is best. And if that includes getting an abortion, there you go. So the youngest generations understand that. Right-wingers need to get into their heads and propagandize to them for them to not understand that. Even if there are children, that get old enough that they can start talking about their beliefs and opinions, they won't be taken seriously either, because to right-wingers, conservatives, Christians, children are property. That's what they believe. That's how they treat them. So they won't take their opinions for anything, especially if they contradict the beliefs of the parents or whatever, right? The adults.
This topic, gets me emotional because I've just seen people go through that.
Go through what? Having an abortion?
And they feel it in their soul and in their spirit that it was wrong.
Is that true?
And they deal with that pain and that shame and regret.
What's interesting? I have to imagine that they might not think of it in that way if they weren't propagandized to and indoctrinated into a religion to begin with. Because it seems like the majority of the time, if somebody's getting an abortion, there are going to be a variety of reasons why they're not going to feel good about that. One, nobody wants to get an abortion. Literally nobody is excited to get an abortion. That doesn't happen. So if you're getting one, you're already doing something you would rather not do, because you'd rather not be pregnant, right? Clearly, if you're getting an abortion, you are not planning to be pregnant. So you're already starting off in the negative. It could also be that the fact that you're pregnant was born out of some kind of assault or rape. These people would try to force that person to give birth to that child, the potential child there, but that would also lead somebody to not want to be pregnant and then get an abortion, because nobody is getting abortions for fun. There could also be that you genuinely do want to have kids, but you don't think you're in a position currently to do so. So when you're pregnant and you realize that I don't have the finances for it, I don't have my life structured in such a way that I could support this child, it would actually be kind of, detrimental to this child's life should I bring it into the world. So I'm just not going to do that. And then you end up getting that abortion, which will usually end up being better off for you and will have potentially been better off for that child, because there are studies that have shown that children that grow up in lower income brackets or with only one parent in the home tend to fare worse. A lot of those concerns go into the getting an abortion decision. So you're not feeling good about that either. There are so many reasons why somebody getting an abortion would feel bad about the fact that they've gotten an abortion. And I do not believe that there would be as many who are like, oh my God, it's such a damaging thing to my soul. I might be going to hell now because of this. I don't think that they would believe that unless there was a structural system set up to put those beliefs into their head. That if they got an abortion, that they would go to hell because it's a sin. That they are lesser of a person for having done that. There are so many other reasons why that are rooted in material reality that the idea of some belief system that you've concocted, and in most cases, you're just born into, is the reason why. I don't think that would be, generally speaking, in a vacuum. I think the other material concerns of, can I afford this? Would this child have a good life because of the fact that I don't have a good system set up to support this child, blah, 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 blah. Those are more directly impactful and are therefore going to be higher on the hierarchy of reasons why people would get an abortion and then feel bad about it. Because everybody feels bad about getting an abortion. Everybody.
My husband himself, him and his sisters, they are all a product of rape. And that's my husband. So to imagine that, he wouldn't be here if...
Listen, I am profoundly sorry that this happens to anybody. But you cannot weaponize that kind of an unfortunate circumstance in order to strip away the bodily autonomy and the individual liberty of every single person who can give birth, in this context, the United States, if not the entire world. You can't do that. Because first of all, not everybody believes in your religion. Not everybody believes that abortion is wrong. And secondly, your religion is also the one that is trying to force the people who have become pregnant because of rape to deliver that baby, to take it to term. Even, in the case of, I believe it was Ohio, literal children being forced to give birth because of your beliefs, your religion, your rules that you want to force onto people because of it. You cannot weaponize that to take the individual liberty away from people. You can't do that. It's a profoundly sad story, and I don't want it to happen to anybody. But the idea that, oh my God, that's my husband. If that victim got an abortion, oh my God, my husband wouldn't be here anymore. Well, then you never would have met him. You wouldn't have this emotional connection to him, and you would have found somebody else. Very simple. The only way you could possibly think that that is not the case is if you think that God specifically handpicked and delivered, signed, sealed, delivered to your door, your current husband, which is already a ludicrous claim. But I guess that is probably what they're believing, so there you go. There's your inbuilt justification for your heinous belief that victims of rape should have to carry children to term.
Maybe it was not in a good experience. Maybe you were raped. Maybe you were a victim to something abusive. Maybe it wasn't planned. But let me tell you something, God, he's never early, never late. He's always on time. And the fact that you were given this gift of life...
Evidently not. Evidently this motherfucker's late habitually. If he can't step in as the all-powerful God himself and stop that horrible event from happening to a person. But I mean, child cancer. God allows that. It wasn't... You don't understand, Glitch. They're saying that God planned for that to happen. God planned for that potential child to be conceived and then brought to term. They planned for that to be the product of rape. That's what they're saying, that God did that, which is insane. If that's what your God is doing, I don't think that God is a very good entity, whatever it is. Like, so obviously this is going to be the same arguments of the Reddit tip milady, thanks for the gold, kind stranger, r/atheism kind of shit of like, oh my God, if God's real, he's allowing for literal child cancer to exist and for children to die of cancer. That's kind of cringe. Why would he do that? If he had the power to stop that and he doesn't, isn't he kind of a dick? It's a good question. And we're kind of seeing, prompts for that here, I guess.
And if you can't handle it or you can't take care of it, there are options.
Yeah, so let's just go through 9 months of pregnancy and then labor. Go through all of the changes to your body. In this case, the violent changes to your body because you did not ask for this, which makes that inherently violent. Then have to go through labor and then give that child who you see up for adoption. Not to mention that, luckily in, the modern day, this isn't as much of a problem, but not to mention the mortality rate for mothers, giving birth. You're potentially risking a lot of damage, if not death to yourself, for something that is completely avoidable with an abortion. And the full cost too, in the goddamn, the greatest nation state, the greatest country in the world, the United States of America, where you do not have a right to health care, and you only get it if you can pay for it. You got to go through the health care system and pay out the nose to bring that baby into the world, the one you didn't want.
Just wondering then, what would you think of people who stand outside of abortion places and try to stop people?
They're cringe.
It makes me so upset, like the people who just protest and try to shove and judge and condemn others.
I guess that's why all these people are in this jubilee thing where they can hide their identities and are not on the street. Like, unironically, you cannot talk shit on the people who literally go out to abortion clinics and talk their shit and try to stop people from having an abortions because you believe the same shit they do, but you're just too pussy to do it. Like, they are unironically living their beliefs more than you are. And you can make an argument that being more covert about it, like these people are, is probably better for society and you'd prefer that. But goddamn, at least they're about it.
That is not love. That is not God. That is not how he would handle people.
Yeah, it's not how he would handle people. He would just allow for children to get cancer and die. And also allow for, children to be birthed into the world through the mother not consenting to it and having to go through all kinds of trauma to do that. That's what he would allow. But that's not, God wouldn't go to a Planned Parenthood or an abortion clinic and be out there and try to proselytize to people and try to stop people from, that's too far. That's a bridge too far for God. Even God has some standards. He would just allow for the fact that people need to get abortions to begin with outside of, accidents in the first place.
I do want to address, I think there's a misunderstanding about what people do who stand out in front.
Oh boy, this Calvin person has been really evil this entire time. Excited to see the defense of the people that go to abortion clinics to try to stop people from making a decision that is already ruining their fucking mind.
Abortion clinics, what they're doing is not abusing them, they're not attacking them, they're letting them know that there's options, telling them about crisis pregnancy centers.
Yeah, no shit. How do you If they didn't think there were options, they wouldn't be at an abortion clinic. Clearly, if they did not know that there were options when it comes to dealing with a pregnancy, they would just have the child. If there was no other option, that's what happens. If your worldview becomes reality for everybody, then that's what happens for everybody. Clearly, if they're at an abortion clinic, they understand that there are options, and they've chosen one of those, which is to get an abortion. Also, I'm pretty sure there's not zero attacking or abuse going on in those interactions. No, definitely not. Literally, Planned Parenthoods, abortion clinics have been firebombed by the people who share the same ideology as the people in this video. Dr. George Tiller was literally assassinated by a person who shared the same ideology as these people because of Bill O'Reilly constantly calling Dr. George Tiller, who was a doctor who performed abortions, Tiller the baby killer, so many times somebody actually went out and killed him. Also, if it truly is murdering a child to get an abortion, when we know that the most common abortion is incredibly early on, if it is truly murder in that circumstance, that's probably a better result than allowing that child to become the adopted child of parents who would literally go to abortion clinics and harass people making one of the worst decisions of their life. Excuse me, but I don't want that child to go into the hands of someone like that because they're probably going to get abused. Let's just be honest.
To adopt their children, explaining them what an abortion really is. They're doing really important work. And if we all believe that abortion is murder, and we all just said that we do, well, then what it is mass murder.
Oh,
it's
boy.
Genocide in the United States.
Oh, boy. Oh, I'm so excited. We are teetering on some interesting subjects here. We are, ooh, interesting. I think Kanye West recently had a similar take. And then he compared this so-called genocide of the unborn to actual genocides that have happened. And we know about his beliefs when it comes to, other religions, let's say.
It's worse than the Holocaust.
Huh? What? So I need you to understand, if you're watching this, I need you to understand that this is literally Holocaust revisionism. This is a kind of Holocaust revisionism or denialism. The idea that this fabricated thing that they think is happening is worse than an actual, well-documented historical event where millions of people were systematically killed by the Nazis in Germany. The idea that this fabrication that these people have in their head about the unborn genocide is worse than the actual documented historical fact of what happened in the Holocaust is literally Holocaust revisionism and denialism. This is not even close to a hop, skip, and a jump away from literally just Nazi talking points. It is one. Even if these people are not Nazis, which I don't know if they are, it is the same talking point. The Nazis use the same talking point. See also Kanye West. Yay, the artist formerly known as Kanye West. A person who was formerly known as an artist, right? That's what that is. That's the kind of severity you should be engaging with this topic with. Now, I'm not saying that if there is somebody in your life, like a friend or family member, that says that talking point, that's not to say that they're a Nazi, right? That's not to say that their beliefs are that far gone. And it's not to say that you should react to that in the same way that I'm doing it right now for the purposes of my infotainment live stream and YouTube video. You should definitely try to be much more couched with your rhetoric and try to, work with them more to try to get at, the root of all that. And best of luck to you. But holy, masturbating is mass murder? Well, I don't think they consider that, because I think most Christians or religious people would consider that, once the sperm meets the egg, then the baby is formed. Immediately, that's a human being worthy of moral consideration, just the same as you and me. That's what they would believe.
And so I wouldn't want to throw stones at someone who's out in front of the concentration camp saying, "Don't murder Jews."
If I speak, I will be banned.
I would want to go alongside that person and applaud that person for being courageous. And I think that's really important work that all Christians should support to help try to fight abortion in this country.
This kind of rhetoric is profoundly dangerous. Because you have to understand that if somebody is at the point where they're willing to literally do Holocaust revisionism, you have to try to understand how they got to that point, right? Because that's not just something that somebody does. Nobody just wakes up one day and is like, well, this is definitely worse, so clearly we've got some thoughts. This is not something normal people think about. This is not something rational people think about. That didn't happen. So something got people with this point of view to that point. And it is incredibly important to analyze what that is and what you could do to stop it. Because this is very dangerous rhetoric. As soon as you start talking about the actual Holocaust, a documented historical fact, and comparing that to this idea you have about an imagined genocide that's happening of unborn people because of abortion, there is so many more branching paths that belief system that got you to that point to begin with could take that could lead you to justifying all kinds of insane shit. Like literally, the common question is, oh my God, if you were alive at the time and you could have killed Hitler, would you done it? Would you go back in time and kill baby Hitler? We understand that the Nazis were so reprehensible that anything done to them in defense of the people they were targeting was justified. We literally fought a war that ended in Adolf Hitler taking his own life, best thing he ever did. That kind of justification, if misapplied like this person is doing right now, like if you actually believe that people who go and get abortions are literally committing a genocide that you say is worse than the Holocaust, well then what happens to those people? If you were alive back then, and you had the chance to save a bunch of Jewish people or disabled people or queer people, well, you probably wouldn't save the queer people from getting killed by Nazis, but you had to kill a Nazi to do that. Would you have done it? Would you have done that to the person getting an abortion then? Well, it seems like the person who assassinated Dr. George Tiller actually lived that value and did kill him because he performed abortions, which was his job. It's very dangerous. Like, I feel like I'm overstating it a bit. I think most reasonable people, given what I've said, should be able to come to that conclusion. Much the same way when it comes to the justifications that religious people and the right use when it comes to the demonization of all queer people as so-called groomers and threats to children. Well, then what do you do to people who are doing that to children, they allege with no evidence, right? It's very dangerous.
I have had sex outside of marriage.
Uh-oh! A bunch of people going to hell. Let's go.
Oh my God. Sorry.
Two of these people are going to hell. The other 5 are as well because lying is also a sin or something.
I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm at the right light now.
Oh, never mind. 4 people going to hell.
We're on many cycles with that. Like, I've had an orgy with females.
Holy!
That one person you can just hit up anytime you want to, and they're available. At some point you have to stop avoiding a sin because God hates not sinners, but the sin, because it comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And I'm now married, and my husband abstained till marriage, and he has had to deal with the repercussions of my sin in the past.
In what way? What does that even mean? Your husband had to deal with the fact that you were having sex before he met you? I don't know how that's his problem. Okay. I mean, what is there even to say about this? It's just funny.
Yeah, I wasn't saved until I was 20.
Oh, God. So as soon as somebody tells you that they were saved by religion, that they converted to religion, like I've said this a billion times, the most dangerous religious person is somebody who converted to being religious or became religious later in their life, because they are more often than not the most fanatical. Most people that are religious are born into the religion. They are born to people, to parents who are religious. They become a part of the culture of those religious parents to the point where those religious parents, more often than not, will try to make sure that kid is also religious like them. And if it turns out they're not, then good luck to that kid. If it turns out that kid is also, gay, trans, whatever, good luck to that kid. But they will try their best to force their child to be the same religion as them. Most people end up staying religious into the rest of their life because of the circumstances of their birth. So it is also then usually going to be the case if you are born to parents who are not religious, it's going to be incredibly unlikely that that child is religious at any point in time. But if they do become religious later on, be careful. Now, like I say, it's not to say that all people who oh my God, I found religion, because I've had a near-death experience, and the way that I've coped with that was finding religion in the community with it. Like I say, not all people who practice religion are inherently bad. I more so criticize the institutions and systemic issues that comes with organized religion that does have trickle-down effects to a variety of individuals within it, obviously. But it is to say that you should always be careful when somebody says they were so-called saved from not being religious, because most people who are religious don't really think about it too much. It's just something that they were born into, and they're like, okay, that's how it's always been. Why would I change it? Whatever,
I did have sex outside of marriage, and even when I was first becoming Christian, I would hear people say, oh, you can't have sex outside of marriage. And I said, okay, well, I'll do everything else. But I won't do that one
does that
thing
mean?
because that's a really hard thing
This man talking about the poop hole loophole? Or is he saying things not like sex, like drugs or whatever?
to give up.
You know, when you have sex with somebody, it's really hard to move on from that. You start feeling all types of things with yourself, and it's just remembering that God doesn't say this to be mean or to be a dictator, but to protect you.
Protect you from what? If we think about what they've said, they talk about, oh, if you have sex with somebody, you know, you can get super attached and you have a lot of feelings about that person and blah, 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 blah. So, like, what is God protecting you from? Like, the potential heartache of losing that person if it doesn't work out or something? I hate to break it to you, but that's life. That's called living. That's called being a human being. You're going to have times in your life where you don't feel good. It's kind of like a pivotal aspect of the human experience. What's interesting about that is one of the best ways that we have found, studies have shown, to prevent the negative ramifications of having sex, which would be unplanned pregnancies, transmission of STIs, abuse, etc., is comprehensive sex education at a young age. Usually it's like 5th, 6th, 7th grade, where you learn about the biology of the human being, how Babby is formed, and you also learn about what is abuse. I mean, ideally in comprehensive sex education, what is abuse, how to know if abuse is happening, how to report that abuse that is happening, how to, you know, properly protect yourself, and all this kind of shit when it comes to avoiding STIs and whatnot. And studies have shown that that is profoundly beneficial in stopping unplanned pregnancies, in reducing the rates, I should say, of unplanned pregnancies, of reducing the rates of STI transmission, of reducing the rates of abuse. Now, unfortunately, I don't know if the question is going to be posed in this particular video, but it seems to be the party line of religious people, of Christians, that they don't think that comprehensive sexual education should happen, that should be the domain of the parent. So if the parent is not equipped to properly have that conversation, or if they push abstinence-only sex education, which has only been shown to be an abject failure, that leads to increased rates of unplanned pregnancy, of abortion, coincidentally, of transmission of STIs, of abuse, not only of children, but also of adults. And if you are met with that evidence, if you are met with the studies that show that, and you continue to believe that, and you continue to try to force your beliefs onto other people through the law to stop comprehensive sex education from being taught, I have to wonder what your motivations are for that. Because you are only doing harm. You are only leading to more of what I was just talking about. And it gives me some questions. So you could avoid all of these problems you're describing if your religion wasn't as bad as it is on that specific topic.
To be completely honest with you, I'm scared of sex. I had a very traumatic experience when I was younger where I've had family members intend to take advantage of me. And because of that traumatic experience, I just have had that fear to be enclosed with just one man in a room.
Even though I have not lost my virginity, pornography has been
So
something.
it is true, by the way, that this is, for one, profoundly devastating. And for two, an unfortunate product of the belief system of everybody in this video and the way that they've tried to turn that belief system into law. Rates of abuse go down with comprehensive sex education. Rates of reported abuse go up, meaning that more people are hopefully brought to justice if they understand what abuse is and what it looks like, especially in this case at a very young age. Of course, you know, there's always potential that it could happen when you're older, and the context is certainly different. It's always going to be devastating. But in this specific context, talking about the youth, and if we're talking about religion, especially Christianity and Catholicism, we have to talk about children in the context of conversations about abuse, because often that is happening due to authority figures in the home, in the church, etc., etc. This is a way you would avoid that. And I hope that anybody who is religious understands that. I do think it is possible to be religious and also be in favor of a comprehensive sex education, or to be in favor of a lot of the things that I talk about in this video that have been proven to actually solve a lot of the problems that these people claim to care about. Because I do believe they actually care about them. I just don't think that they understand the ways that would actually be effective. It seems like that the propaganda fed to them by the politicians, pundits, and religious leaders has kind of warped their understanding of it to the point where, like, they're actually working against their own best interests, which is just a tale as old as time, because that's been the ultimate project of Republicans, conservatives in this country forever.
That fear to be enclosed with just one man in a room.
Even though I have not lost my virginity, pornography
Keep
has
holding
been
strong.
something that has been rampant in my life, and that sexual sin as well is truly, in my spiritual experience, has been almost equal. Going wrong against God, going wrong against self, that brings so much shame, so much guilt. But when the forgiveness comes, we see the true glory of God, because we see how broken we were and how reformed we are through Christ.
What does that mean when the forgiveness comes? What does that look like? What does that mean? Who's forgiving you? Because I find it hard to believe you're interfacing directly with God. Usually there are people that can do that, like priests or whatever. So, like, are the priests forgiving you? Is your community forgiving you? I actually don't know what that looks like. Those are my assumptions. It's just, it's just a bit odd. I find it hard to believe that if it was possible to do this, if other animal species masturbate, they don't watch porn necessarily, but if they masturbate, I find it hard to believe that that wasn't a thing that, if God is real and created humans, he didn't expect that to happen or something. Very weird.
How reformed we are through Christ.
They usually claim that God is the one that forgave them. Well, it doesn't even have to be in their dreams or whatever. It could just be like, oh, well, the envoy of God, the priest or whatever, forgave me in the confession booth and blah, blah, blah.
Anyone who isn't Christian is going to hell.
Uh-oh. So here's an interesting answer here. A very interesting question. Anyone who isn't Christian is going to hell? Guarantee that a lot of these people are going to say yes to that. But non-religious people would never say that about religious people, for instance. Their take would not be, oh, you're religious? Well, you're going to be condemned to torture in some mythological place, literally for eternity, for not believing what I believe. Like, no atheist is saying that. And frankly, the idea that would be these people's beliefs, like, oh, because of who you are, in the case of condemning people for being queer, or because of unfortunate circumstances in the case of getting an abortion, you're going to go to hell, or simply not believing in the things that I believe, you're going to be tortured for eternity. That's kind of aggressive. It almost sounds like a threat. Now, it's not to say that they use it in that way, though some do. That's usually a pivotal part of the upbringing of a child born to religious parents. Oh, if you do XYZ, you're going to go to hell. It can be very traumatizing to a child to tell them that. But it doesn't sit right with me. That would be a thing that you just like flippantly throw around. Like, oh my God, you love a person who happens to identify as the same gender as you? Well, you, my friend, because of my personal belief system, have been condemned to literal torture for the rest of eternity. It's kind of an insane thing to say. Anyway, sorry. Hey, we got three of them.
This one's a pretty easy one.
Yeah, of course it would be, you fucking cretin. Holy shit. This person is literally evil. God damn.
6, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
Oh my God, nobody comes through the Father except for... What is that about? I thought we weren't talking about sex. Sorry, that was a low-hanging fruit.
Christians, when we say we believe in the Bible, either we believe what Jesus said or we don't.
But did Jesus say that? Did Jesus say that if you're not a Christian, you're going to be going to hell?
It's a tough sentence to answer, and to be honest, I suppose I can't just flatly say yes or no, so it's tough. But with that being said, what does Christian really mean?
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, I said no because everybody uses the word Christian now, right?
Do they?
I believe there's Christians who aren't going to go to heaven.
Oh yeah, we got to find some way to prove that the Christians are actually Christians. Like, do they have to go to church? Do they have to keep like receipts of every time they've prayed? How many Hail Mary, full of grace, hallowed be thy names they did, right? How do you prove that?
What about people who subscribe to, like, say Judaism or Islam?
It goes back to the Bible. It says that to go to heaven, you have to confess with your mouth and believe in your heart that Jesus Christ is Lord. And there's a lot of people who don't identify as Christians who believe that. What if there's a Satanist on his deathbed? At that moment, they confess with their mouth and they believe in their heart. Like, they didn't live their whole lives being Christian. Are they going to go to hell? I don't believe that. So I
feel like you'd be in the minority for not believing that. Also, I'm not too sure I would trust the judgment of a person who is literally just about to die when it comes to almost like anything as profound as that they would say. Because at that point, they are literally at one of their most desperate moments. They are about to die. You could convince somebody of anything, and all kinds of shit could be going on there. I don't know that I would necessarily, trust that.
I think to say that if you're not Christian, you're going to go to hell, it's kind of an absolute that drives more people away from Christianity than brings them in.
I'm thinking of babies that have died, and
they're going to hell. I'm sorry. If you're a child, but you do not have the mental capacity because you are too young to understand what religion is, you then technically don't believe that Jesus Christ is Lord because you don't know what that is. And if you die as a child, you're going to hell. I didn't make the rules.
I don't think that they would go to hell because they didn't.
Aren't children in purgatory technically? Oh, so much better.
Even know how to make a sound.
And God gives us a choice whether we want to spend eternity with him or whether we don't. And that's
Like, is God really so weak that he can't rescue those aborted children who are in purgatory instead of heaven and bring them to heaven? I don't believe that.
a free will choice that he gives to all of us.
Oh, shit. From the graces of his own heart, if he has one, he gives us free will. How can we have free will by your description if it can be taken away or given? Is it really free at that point?
We all have to accept that we all are sinners, and the wages of sin is death. The wages of sin is separation from God. But I've heard people's stories who didn't even know the Bible and had near-death experiences where they actually went and visited hell the way that it was described in the Bible.
Cool. I don't think I would believe that person, personally. Like, I don't know, it's so insane. If this wasn't Christianity, if there wasn't an entire historical precedent of people believing this shit for so long to the point where it's become normalized in society, we would see the things these people are saying as cult-like. Because it is. Like, it's insane to me. The participation trophy that Christianity and other religions get for not, like, immediately being seen with, at the very least, skepticism when people talk about shit like this is insane. It's absurd. Like, I know we're getting into, like, the lay Reddit atheist shit, but goddamn, it's weird. Like, replace Christianity, Jesus Christ, and God with any other cults that have existed that coincidentally probably also had religious elements that people rightfully look at and be like, oh my God, that's a cult. That's fucked up. A lot of crazy shit going on in there. But they will not extend the same thought process to Christianity and other religions because those are, you know, it's older. There's more tradition there. It's so dumb. We talked about this briefly earlier in the stream. This is the big problem with r/atheist Andes, is that they're actually right in a lot of the things that they say, but their optics are so bad that when I have similar takes, I feel cringe. I feel like I'm being cringe for having similar takes because of how cringe the r/atheist motherfuckers are. Because like this has always been my take. I think I talked about it already, but like religion is a tool. It can be used for good or bad. It's like a tool like anybody else. It can be used for good or bad. Unfortunately, it seems like a lot of the time it's used for bad. We see that as evidenced in the answers that these people give to all these questions, and then the actual systemic, you know, and material things that happen due to people who believe the same things, getting power in society and forcing those beliefs on other people. So, like, if there are people out there who are religious, but aren't like these people that think that it's okay for queer people to exist and blah, 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 like, I don't necessarily care too much. And there are other religions out there that are not as fucking insane as these people. In a vacuum, I would prefer that religion not exist. But the unfortunate thing about that is you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Pandora's box has already been opened, so we have to deal with the reality we are in right now. And that is one where religion exists and still has a lot of power, though it's weakening, on society and people in it. And because of that, if there are, for instance, people out there trying to weaponize religion for good and try to move people toward more social progressivism and even like economic policy, because there are a lot of, you know, analogies you can make to what Jesus Christ talked about and stood for, and a variety of economic policies that would uplift the poor, make sure they have a home, and, you know, heal the sick and care for the sick, you know. Like, there are so many ways you could do that, and I do support the people that are going to do that, the religious people that are willing to try to do that. But, you know, that's just, it is what it is. I'm not in favor of religion. I'm not a big fan of it, because I've seen the negative aspects of it, and I've learned about the negative aspects of it that I have not myself individually experienced.
I'm scared of dying.
Damn, 7 disagrees. That's not too shocking. I think most people would say they're scared of dying. Mostly because most people don't want to. Even people that take their life often don't necessarily want to. It's just the conditions of their life, often outside of their control, have led them to making that choice, unfortunately. I'm sure there are some people that are like literally like on the extreme end of that, but like generally speaking, people that take their own lives, if in better circumstance, would not do it, you know? So, like, I think most people would be afraid of death in that they don't want it to happen to them. But, of course, everybody here is going to lie to themselves and say that they don't because of why religion was invented to begin with. To cope with the unknown and to cope with the fact that death exists. To try to help explain what happens after you die. Well, it's this fantastical, magical place as long as you follow exactly what I believe. But if you do the bad things, you go to hell and you're tortured forever. people is dying around you, and it's like, okay, well, we got to explain that somehow. And we're in a position in our human existence, in our history, where we don't really have the tools to explain it, and we still kind of don't. We don't actually know what happens after you die. We know what happens to your corporeal self. We don't know if a soul exists or not, though we have not seen much evidence to support that. And I say some, we haven't seen any. Anyway. So, like, the entire foundation of religion is built upon people trying to figure out and explain what happens when people die and what happens after you die, and also to explain a variety of things about the world that they don't know. Like, why is it that there was a tornado here? First of all, how did that even happen? And second of all, why did a bunch of people in my community die because of it? Surely there has to be a reason. Why did this earthquake happen and fell these trees and ruin this previously put together ecosystem that humans benefited from? Why did this forest fire happen that led to all of our crops getting burned, right? Well, surely it's because we didn't believe in God enough. And you use these stories that you've been told to cope with the unknown. But the reason why a lot of religion and religiosity is on the decline is because we are starting to understand a lot more about the unknown. Now, we don't know what happens after you die, necessarily. We don't know if a soul exists or if God is real. We just haven't seen any proof to support that those things do exist. But we do have enough information, technology, and knowledge to understand how hurricanes happen, how tornadoes, how, the causes of death that people will have where previously you might not have known. Like, way back in the day, you might not even know what an aneurysm is. Somebody just up and dies. It's like, oh shit, well, what did that happen? They didn't have many signs that I could see that I was familiar with as being potential signs of death. But it just happened. Well, why did that happen? Well, now we know aneurysms are a thing. Cancer is a thing. We have the tools to understand a variety of things that people previously used religion to kind of cope with, that lack of understanding, that we don't really need it as much anymore. So less and less people are believing in it. And also, the people who are trying to get more and more people to be religious are really bad at making that happen because they've so deeply politicized religion and their beliefs to the point where it's kind of off-putting to a lot of people. A lot of people understand the negative ramifications of the belief system of these people, especially if people like this get power, and they don't like it. They don't like that idea because that idea leads to them losing their freedoms, right? The freedom to be the people that they are if they happen to be gay, trans, whatever. The freedom over their individual liberty and bodily autonomy if they happen to get pregnant. They don't want to lose those freedoms because human beings like their individual liberty, so they don't want the religious beliefs of these people to become law, clearly. It's almost like our entire country was founded on that concept of there is no religion that should be able to influence your life at the level of law, at the level of the state, and that there should be a separation between the two. But of course, conservatives, Republicans, religious people have been working overtime to undo that. And this is not even to mention the idea that, oh my God, you're not afraid of death. What does that even mean then for your life that you're living now? I think this is like a very old talking point at this point. But if you believe that as long as you live this life the way that the book you read says you should, that you are going to go to heaven and it is so profoundly better than what you have on earth, why the hell would you give a damn about the life you have on earth? Doesn't seem to be much point. You just kind of live it until you die and then you go to heaven and it's better. But if you don't believe in an afterlife, then clearly you're going to try to make as much of the life you have currently as you possibly can because it's the only thing that you have. My death will be exactly like what I had before I was born. Yeah, and this is a lot of old talking points when it comes to agnosticism, atheism, or anti-theism. But I don't know, it's just, things to consider, I guess. It seems kind of boring to talk about considering how tired it all is.
Live is Christ and to die is gain. That's my father's favorite verse.
To die is gain.
We are gaining eternal life. We are gaining a new faith. We are gaining a new body. We are gaining everything. Not that being here doesn't have his...
Like, death cult shit. Death cult. Death cult. If you're not careful, that's what you're going to be led to. A death cult. I think most rational people, if religion did exist, they wouldn't think that there was much to be gained from dying. It seems like you lose a lot, actually, But religion has the capacity to convince you that to die is to gain, which can lead to a lot of negative outcomes, like people who will go out and do things like take the lives of others and themselves if their religion has promised them that they're going to go to heaven for doing it. It leads to a lot of really, really difficult and potentially dangerous conclusions.
Its joys, but to be with him, obviously, is...
It's the best. Yeah. I always say I can't wait to die.
Like, what the hell are you talking about, man? What do you mean you can't wait to die? What does that even... You're not a big fan of the life you have right now? It's possible. It's a very common human experience to not really be the biggest fan of the life that you have. But usually the reasons for that are material. The economy that you live in that is outside of your control is fucked to the point where you can't keep the lights on or you're struggling to keep food on the table. or the people around you don't accept you for being who you are and just living your life and existing as a queer person or a person not of, the religious denomination of Christianity, where, at that point, you're not a really big fan of living because all the people around you hate you and are telling you you're going to go to hell. Type of shit is why Christians don't give a fuck about taking care of the planet? Probably, though I think you could make arguments that are rooted in religion for the protection of the earth. But I mean, none of that shit matters because it's all been politicized. Much the same way that religion has been politicized wholesale in the United States, climate change is one of the political positions that seems to have been ingrained into it. And that a lot of these religious conservative people in the United States don't believe that climate change is real. Don't believe that human activity is having negative ramifications on the earth.
No, my sister and I, we're always like, God, just come take us. Like, we don't want to be here anymore.
That's insane. That is not a good mental state to be in. That's sad. What do you mean? You're saying we don't want to be on Earth anymore. We don't want to be inhabiting these bodies we have anymore. At any point in time, had it ever occurred to you that you might want to analyze why that is? Why you yearn for heaven and the afterlife so much to the point where you're literally begging to not be on Earth anymore and to die? It seems, I don't know, some armchair psychology. It seems to me that your religion is kind of blinding you to a lot of these other problems that, if addressed, might make the life you're living right now a lot better. What do I know? I haven't said as many Hail Marys, so.
I look forward to the day where I see the saints gathered, worshiping Christ, and I could cry about it. It is going to be so surreal and so beautiful, and
the coolest thing about that is that there's no way to prove that it happens. So, I mean, it's about as real as you believe it to be. I can't be like, oh, well, wouldn't that be such a letdown if that wasn't the case? Because how could we possibly know?
Death is
it's unfalsifiable.
The way to get there.
Yeah.
I fear losing my non-believer friends and family.
Time to pretend to give a shit about people. Let's go. Like we've been doing this entire goddamn video.
It would be the greatest pain to go to heaven and not see your siblings there.
I mean, my dad isn't saved and half my
Imagine these people went to hell instead. Lol. And all their siblings are actually up in heaven. Absolutely rolled.
family are Catholic. And I can't imagine a more miserable place than away from the perfect creator of all things.
In John 6, Jesus says that of all those that the Father has given me, I will not lose one. And so God is faithful and just, and I trust God that He will save all of His people. I do pray for my loved ones who are unbelievers. I share the gospel with them. But ultimately, I know it doesn't depend on me. Salvation is in His hands, so it's not for me to fear or worry.
Like, so this person is a proselytizer. They want to try to convert as many people as they can to their religion, which is a profoundly dangerous position for a person to take, as we've seen historically. Like, if this person had their way, the law of the land in the United States of America would force people to be religious because they would think that that would be saving them.
In the Bible, it says that it's God's will for everyone to be saved. But at the same time, the truth is that not everyone will. When I was an unbeliever, I would always wonder, why are Christians always wanting to shove their beliefs down my throat?
It's a good question.
We know what the Bible says, that people will go to hell. And if we don't tell people about it, that blood is almost on our hands.
They always say, ain't no hate like Christian love, brother. Ain't no hate like Christian love.
And I do fear that...
Like, it's just more cope, because it always is, right? Like, you can tell people of, like, the actual historical detriments that these people's beliefs have had for usually marginalized groups, and they've, in order to avoid feeling bad about that, and then, so these individual people may not have caused that to happen, but their belief system did. People that believed in the same things that they did, right? And they've twisted themselves into a pretzel to cope with that, and be like, oh, well, no, I was just trying to save you. Stop hitting yourself. Stop hitting yourself. I hurt you because I'm trying to help you. It's abuser shit. It's abuser logic. But I mean, then again, isn't it always?
There will be people that I know and love who won't ever come to God, but I know that there is still hope for them.
We'll have you put your masks back on.
Is this really good enough at obscuring their identities? I feel like it's not. Well, anyway. What an insane video. What are these comments looking like? Putting gay cousin and molester uncle in the same tier is actually crazy? Well, that's what they believe. They were being actually very honest in that moment. This is the most authentic group of Christians I've ever seen in videos like this. Props on casting. That's probably true. This is like a compliment to the casting, but it is an insult to the individual Christians that were on here. Yikes, this one exactly like I thought it would. Calling rape a gift and ignoring the trauma of the mother is insane. Every experience I've had with Christians was like this. I'm glad so many people in here are reacting in the correct way, ridiculing the people in the video. I'm so glad I didn't grow up in America. This video is wild to me. Christians in my country seem so normal compared to this. I have so much more empathy and understanding. I'm glad I live in my country. The ego of thinking you know better than me is so insane. The superiority complex is another level. The politicization of religion. These people's politics is their religion. These people's religion is their politics. That's why they get so vitriolic. I'm so upset because this video hurts my heart as a Christian. I feel like that group of people is making us look horrible, and I swear we aren't all like this. Well, you might want to do a little soul searching then. Do you really want to be associated with these people? Because I can assure you, you probably know a good amount of people within your own interpersonal group of believers that have similar beliefs. Yeah, okay, thank God. Seems like the majority of the comments, at least in the higher tiers here, are not as insane as the people in the video. Very nice. Anyway, religion, it's a tool, can be used for good or bad. Unfortunately, a lot of the time, it's being used for bad. If you're on the left, I guess, and want to try to use religion for good, you have my support. It is what it is.